All right, we're back with another edition of the WFNY podcast. Today, I am joined by the OBR'er Jake Burns. For those watching live on video or later on YouTube, Jake currently does not have a camera, so he is a headless person. Just the audio for Jake today. But yeah, 5 weeks ago, Jake and I discussed the first quarter of the Browns season, one that the Browns went 3-1 in. Very good. Everything looked good. And then Nick Chubb got hurt in the fourth game of the season, and then the offense kind of looked average at times. They still played well, but they looked average as well. And then OBJ got hurt a couple weeks ago, and in the Raiders game, the latest game of the Browns, they just did not look good offensively. I mean, they barely had any chances to show what they could do offensively, but they just did not look good. So we're going to recap the second quarter of the Browns season. Cannot believe that the Browns are halfway through the season already. The NFL season's flying by. But yeah, Jake, how are you?
I'm good, Josh. I'm good, man. Thanks for having me on.
What are your thoughts? I guess we'll talk. I know the Browns actually are fully healthy following the bye week. Besides OBJ, everyone on the active roster is healthy. Not 100%, but healthy enough to play. How important is that?
It's pretty vital, man. I mean, they need to get back to what made them an effective offense in the first half of the year, which was at least the first quarter of the year, which was being able to effectively dominate the line of scrimmage, running the football in a variety of ways, and being able to be the people. You saw Oakland do what Cleveland ultimately wants to do, which is control the clock, keep opposing offenses off the field, and I think that's what they would like to be able to become as a team that's able to. Once again, I thought they did it earlier in the year. Is control the line of scrimmage, control the running game, control the clock, throw timely passes in unpredictable situations, and sort of win football games that way. I don't know that it'll always be a great recipe for them because the defense is just so inconsistent. But as far as what their ideal offensive picture is it's just for the time being, it's going to be the ability for the group to be as successful as it wants to be is predicated on the running game. So getting Wyatt Teller back, getting Nick Chubb back, having two running backs in the backfield to feel good about again are substantial difference makers. And then, Wyatt Teller's before his absence, and I know that there were more games to be played as you lead up to the grades that, include where everybody is at this point in the season. But at the time Wyatt Teller went out, he was the highest graded Pro Football Focus lineman by far and dominating the right guard position and on track to be an all-pro, not just a Pro Bowler, but a genuine all-pro at the position. So it would be exciting if Wyatt is A, able to play, and B, able to get back to that dominating level of play that he was putting on film in the first quarter of the year. So getting those two guys back, very important for sure.
For sure. I mean, Nick Chubb going down was obviously a huge injury, but I think part of the running game kind of declining over the last few weeks is just Wyatt Teller not being there. He's showed, just like you said, he showed his dominance. But yeah, obviously, like I said, Chubb not being there, he's one of the best running backs in the NFL, so that's obviously a huge absence. But getting Wyatt Teller back is almost just as important as getting Nick Chubb back. Do you think so?
Without a doubt. Nick is, yeah. I mean, to be as good as they want to be up front, it's not to knock Chris Hubbard. I thought Chris Hubbard played pretty fine at times, admirably at times, filling in a position that Chris hasn't played in a long time, if very many snaps at all in the NFL. I haven't really researched Chris's career, but I know he's extensively been a tackle. So stepping in at guard was a nice job by him to fill in. I think getting Nick back is really important from a vision perspective and what they're able to do from a variety of different run looks, because Nick is a more effective zone runner, as Kareem is a more effective gap runner. I think getting Nick back is huge. The difference is, I mean, if you're getting Wyatt Teller back at the level he was playing before he went down, that's a difference maker. If you're getting a guy back who's sort of timid about the calf and is not playing with full exertion of that leg that he was playing with, that base of power prior to the injury, then it's not going to be that big a difference from Chris Hubbard, because, you obviously need two trusted and very effective legs to be a really good offensive lineman. So I think it's trending toward Nick playing this weekend. I'm still not sure why it plays. if you know anything about calf strains, they're really dangerous for a re-injury, and you have to be careful about making sure that the calf is at full strength by the time you go out there again, or the muscle fibers will tear, and you're set back. I mean, I've been pointing to this since I've come on this show, because it's a not any just this show, but any show, is the contention of calf strains. And if you're a Cleveland fan, you kept hearing them from Lonnie Chisenhall. He would get them all the time, and it was a problem where I know when I was younger, I would be like, I don't really understand why a calf strain, which just kind of sounds like a bruise. Like, why is that keeping somebody out so long? But it's a high injury risk, and there's a lot of exertion that gets put on your calf on every single step you take, just as a walking element, let alone trying to drive another 300-pound person out of the line of scrimmage. So it's a dangerous re-injury thing, and I hope that they don't rush that back, and I hope it works out. But yeah, I mean, we haven't seen the official in and out injury report. That'll come out later today at some point. But for now, I'm a little skeptical that Wyatt will be able to play. He might, but I won't be surprised if they rule him out one more week.
For sure. I mean, it's more of like a longer term view than short term. You want him back this week, but if it's going to affect him for the last 7 games of the season, plus maybe the playoffs, I think you'd rather sit him out 1 or 2 more weeks just to be safe, just like you said. And by the way, it was a great comparison, but I cannot believe Lonnie Chisenhall just brought up in this podcast.
I figured that would be
the
a nice
legend, Lonnie Chisenhall.
WFNY reference there for folks. That's like the only guy I remember like dealing with calf strains all the time as a Cleveland fan. Like he would get them like every other year, and then he'd re-injure them. But yeah, that's I figured that might be a nice point of reference.
For sure. But yeah, we all know how bad this defense struggles. I mean, they're good at causing turnovers, but besides that, they give up way too many yards. Whether the running defense is decent, passing defense outside of Denzel Ward has a lot of question marks. But I think, like you mentioned before, if Nick Chubb comes back fully healthy, the Browns can do what the Raiders did to them offensively. They can do that the rest of the season. Just control the clock, keep the Browns defense off the field, keep the opposing offense off the field, and just control the clock, wear down the defense, and hopefully just win the game in the end, even if it's a low-scoring game.
Yeah, they don't care about how these games look the rest of the way. Certainly, they just need to keep pace with the Colts, who jumped to 6-3. They need to keep pace with the Raiders. Obviously, those teams that they're fighting with at the fringe playoff level, which is Miami's creeped into that territory as well. But yeah, the ideal thing for this team to do is create some turnovers, get your offense into positions where they can score early, get a lead early, and play ball control, clock control football. And that is the best case scenario for Cleveland right now, is to get into as many of those situations as they can. Because if they find themselves in situations where they consistently have to throw to catch up, or they have to play, games in which their defense is being nickel and dime down the field against Oakland, and their offense only gets a few opportunities, a low volume of opportunities in any given game, it's probably not going to turn out well for the Browns. So their defense, it's paramount that they create some stops, make the other team punt. In the last 2 weeks, they've only forced opposing offenses to punt 1 time, which is an amazing stat when you think about it. And they have not created many turnovers. So certainly a big point of emphasis for Joe Wood's defense going into the second half of the year is to let their offense do what they do best, and do some of the little things that the defense was doing to create some problems for offenses in the first half of the year.
I guess I did not realize the Browns have only punted once the last 2 weeks, or last 2 games. That's a crazy stat. And somehow they're 1-1 in those games. That is wow.
So the Cincinnati game, the Browns offense, I don't even know if the Browns punted once. I think they might have punted, maybe they punted once in the first quarter, actually, I think, but like for the most part, yeah, they didn't force Cincinnati into a single punt, and they only forced Oakland into one. So they got lucky they won the shootout, and then the win game was really strange, but they just couldn't get Oakland off the field in 3rd and 4th downs. I think the Browns have allowed 4th down on 6 of their last 7 have been converted or something like that. So they're struggling on not just 3rd down, but 4th down when they need to get a short yardage stop.
Yeah, I think it's simple. The Browns defense just struggles, unfortunately. I mean, when the offense is pretty good at times, but when the defense struggles, it makes things much tougher for the offense because there's very little room for error. The margin of error is just super small. You can't afford to make a stupid turnover or have a huge drop pass as the Browns have had over the last few weeks as well. Speaking of passing, the question is, are the Browns better with OBJ? Is Baker better or worse with OBJ? I think having OBJ on the field, even if he's not catching footballs, I think it just makes things easier for the offense because of the OBJ factor. The defense has to worry about him. Like I said, even if he has 2 targets, 0 receptions, the defense still has to worry about him. They still have to game plan for him. He just changes so much for a game plan. So how are the Browns affected without OBJ the rest of the year since he has a torn ACL?
I think what you alluded to there is right. I think there's the element of people wanting to look at specifically the data of how Baker throws to OBJ and that data tied together and the lack of production that we all thought would happen. But a lack of production for Odell can sometimes mean an increase in uptick in production for others around him, especially the run game where they were averaging 5.3 yards with him off the field and 3.9 with him. Sorry, 5.3 with him on the field and 3.9 with him off the field. That's a substantial difference on a down-to-down basis. So that's important. And there's the element of being able to have a guy who doesn't do a redundant skill set type thing. Like Jarvis and Rashard Higgins are fine football players, but neither of them are going to be threats to run past a corner and a safety and catch a ball over the top. That's not what they're known for. So you do get into a redundancy in roles. You need somebody that you feel like can take the lid off the defense. Kevin Stefanski mentioned that they had a package of plays they wanted to run with Taywan Taylor involved, but the wind last Sunday, or the Sunday before, I should say now, was not going to allow for either team to throw the football downfield very far. So it was kind of a moot point, and they decided to go away from it. So, they have Taywan Taylor who can run a little bit. They have Donovan Peoples-Jones who can run a little bit. They certainly played Kadero Hodge a bit more than I was expecting, probably due to the blocking element of things and wanting a guy on the field that they could trust to predictably be that third receiver who could block. And in a game where they were going to run the football a ton, they knew they had to anyway. They would prefer to have Kadero out there blocking instead of Taywan Taylor. So that's probably why you saw, or Donovan Peoples-Jones. So that's why you saw his snap count stay pretty high in his first game back. So listen, they need to find a way to mix up roles and get a situation where they feel like they have somebody who can lift the lid off the defense a little bit. But that's the thing, like with Odell, it's not a replace Odell with one-to-one ratio. Like you don't find guys like him because he can do the short, intermediate, create separation, be a backside route runner, catch wide receiver screens, catch deep shots. He can do it all. So you have to kind of roll 2 or 3 players into one and look at filling all the roles that he was able to do or was doing at the time by being able to grab what they do well and interchange them in and out. So you're not going to replace Odell with one guy. If it was a one-to-one, that wouldn't be a reason to pay Odell a large sum of money. He can do a lot of different things, and you have embedded deception because of that. So you lose a little bit of that deception that you would have. Maybe you bring Taywan Taylor in the game. Teams know, hey, they're probably going to send him deep, so on and so forth. There's predictability in that whole situation. So you're not going to replace him, but you have to find ways to open up levels of the field that they were getting open with Odell too. So, it gives guys opportunities. I don't know. Does Baker become a better quarterback? There needs to be more data on that still about how he distributes the football, how he goes through reads. All that stuff is a conversation for another time about what he sees when Odell's not on the field, and maybe a little less worry about finding a guy and maybe a little bit more focus on just worrying about where the eyes are supposed to go snap to snap and worrying less about the read or who's on the other end of the read and just kind of focusing on the read itself and delivering the football where it should be. So we'll see how that all shakes out. We'll have an 8-game sample size by the end of the year to see whether Baker Mayfield's more effective without a star receiver on the field. This can be a thing sometimes, so it's worth monitoring. But to say the Browns offense is going to just be better overall, run game, pass game, all of it, and even the trick scheme stuff too, which is something he was a very big part of, reverse passes, all of that stuff. To say they're better without him on the field is collectively is a different discussion, and one that I probably can't. I just can't get behind that right now. So, like I said, when you're arguing is Baker a better player without Odell is a completely different argument than is your offense a better offense without Odell. And I don't think you can sit here and say an offense is better losing a talent like that. So we'll see how it all shakes out.
For sure. Well, that's a lot of information, but I agree with all of it. Speaking of OBJ just opening up the field, I guess this is kind of like an easy question, maybe an easy answer. How does OBJ's absence affect the run game? Because I feel like without necessarily a good deep threat, even if it's Taylor, I wouldn't really be scared of him per se. How does that affect the run game? Because the opposing defenses can just load the box, right? Even if you do a play action, no one very good is going to beat you deep. So can you just load the box and focus on Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt and just stopping those guys and then make Baker Mayfield beat you in the passing game?
Yeah, I mean, you certainly answered your own question there. Because it is obvious. Teams, there's a cliche in the NFL that you have to earn 2 high safeties, which means if you don't have somebody who we think is going to be a problem for our corners, if you don't have somebody who you think can consistently beat your guys in the deep portions of the field, then we're only going to play 1 safety, and we're going to commit an extra guy to the second level and sometimes an extra guy to the first level of the defense to clog up run lanes, to clog up quick passing game, because we know you want to throw the football quick to the group of receivers you have on the field. You don't want to drop back because you don't trust those guys to create separation. So you're going to see less 2 high safety looks. You're going to see more guys crowded into the second level of the defense and the first level of the defense getting closer to the football. So it's going to put a burden on everybody to certainly show that they can handle different stuff that they're not comfortable doing. Whether that is guys traditionally like to run short intermediate routes, they're going to have to challenge themselves and work down the field and show that they can produce. Baker's going to have to throw to various parts of the field he hasn't thrown to. It just takes everybody out of what might have been their comfort zone, and it makes everybody have to step up to the challenge and kind of, be able to do some things you weren't doing. Because if you keep the status quo and you continue to run, whether it's whether it's Jarvis or Higgins or your tight ends on the same predictable schemes, defenses, like I said, they know you want to run the football. They know you want to throw certain portions of the field that maybe you weren't targeting Odell at. They're going to have an idea that they need to step down and play those areas. So everything gets condensed into a tight area unless you have a way of beating them down the field. So I'm sure that's what they will try to figure out a way to beat teams down the field somehow, some way. We'll see if Kevin Stefanski can get creative with that stuff, some play action, some different things like that.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to stay on the Odell Beckham thing too long, but without Odell, do you think, I guess now that Austin Hooper, I'm assuming is 100%, do you think Austin Hooper, well, let's put it this way. Do you think Stefanski will run more 2 and 3 tight end sets without OBJ? Or do you think it'll be like more 2 running back sets or a mixture of both? Or what are your thoughts on that?
It could be. I mean, yeah, I think they'll still have balance there because they have guys like Harrison Bryant, and all 3 of their tight ends can line up in the slot. They trust that David Njoku can play X if they wanted him to play X. He's done it before as a single receiver side. Like, they'll play 3 tight end sets, and they'll feature those guys as wide receivers at the same time, and I expect them to keep some of that flexibility. So, like, that's a big part of things I think will happen. I certainly think that they'll have 3 wide receiver sets going forward too. It's hard to say. It's all going to change with Odell out, and we don't really have the data set to truly know because Sunday was just such a wash in terms of what they traditionally want to do in the passing game. So I would not be surprised to see a high uptick of 13 personnel where you have 3 tight ends that can play in various spots because there are advantages to that, and defenses base personnel and all of that stuff. So I don't think it'll change a ton, but I do think, you'll see – you've seen quite a few 2 tight end sets. Let me put it that way. I think you'll see an uptick in 3 where they know that those 3 are probably some of their better pass catchers in general. So let's get those guys on the field as often as we can. But then it comes down to, can you create separation with those guys all the time? So that's what they'll have to figure out too.
For sure. Yeah, I think the biggest question mark in the passing game is just, can you create separation? I mean, we know Jarvis can get open, but besides Jarvis, I mean, I don't really have 100% faith in any other wide receiver, unfortunately. So that makes things tough for not only the passing game and Baker Mayfield, but also the running game, because if I don't have trust in those guys, the opposing defense obviously has full trust that they, you know what I mean? So it's the opposite. I'm just worried. I know, like I said 10 minutes ago, I know everyone's like, well, is Baker Mayfield and the Browns better without OBJ on the field? But I'm just worried that the OBJ factor, like I said, even if he's not catching footballs, it's still OBJ. So the defense has to worry about him, and it affects everything offensively. So I don't know. I don't know what to think. The offense didn't look good last week without OBJ. We know that, but they also didn't get very many opportunities. So maybe that was the case too. And I don't know. Stefanski had a bye week to figure it out, but I'm just afraid that the offense isn't going to be able to move. I mean, if they want to move down the field, it's going to have to be like short and sweet plays. It's not going to be anything long unless they like break a run or somehow get open downfield. But I just don't have much faith in this offense right now without OBJ. I hope that changes sooner rather than later.
Yeah, it's tough to tell. There's certainly talent. I mean, it's just how they use those guys and the situations they use. Like I can see. Here's the good thing: they don't play a ton of defenses in the second half of this year, who are great DVOA based Football Outsiders defenses. Philly's not a great defense. Houston doesn't have a great defense by any stretch. They play the Titans, who have been sort of up and down. They play Jacksonville, who's been pretty anemic. So there's opportunities to put points on the board. The second half of the year does not have the sheer talent defensively as the first half of the year, when you saw Washington, the Colts, the Steelers early in the Ravens season. Like, I think there are opportunities where the Browns will be at a point where their skill set will be even or greater than who they're playing against. So I think there's certainly going to be opportunities to beat bad defenses, which will help, and it'll make it a little bit easier in that burden. It's just a matter of, like I said, putting guys in the right position to take advantage of their skill sets and not trying to replace Odell with one player. Because you can't. So find ways to, if teams are going to crowd the box, then find ways to beat them over top. You got guys who can run. You got guys who can make catches down the football field. They've proven it. Find ways to do that. Play action. Boot stuff. Various deceptive. Different deceptive schemes that you can use. Run more screens. I wrote an article about the fact they've only run 12 screens this year, and it's kind of crazy to me that this offense has only run 12 screens, especially when they've ran. Baker himself ran over 70 last year, and Kirk Cousins had in the mid-50s at the end of last year, and it's halfway through the year they've only run 12. So I expect an uptick in that. But listen, the talent's there to still be a really good offense, and the schedule's favorable. So I don't think I'm going to worry about it all too much until I need to worry about it. But they're going to have to be creative with how they approach this thing and try to burn defenses who might get a little bit too aggressive playing forward.
On the topic of screens, yeah, I know you've been saying that for a while, that they just don't run much, which is weird because Kareem Hunt, wasn't he known for being a very good screen guy with KC and even with the Browns before this year?
Yeah. I mean, Nick Chubb was second in the NFL in screen yards last year. So, like, they can do it. They have two backs who are fine. I mean, Nick and Kareem is a great pass-catching running back in general, not just screens. Any route that you want to put him on, he's fine. He's adept at it. He's proven it. So I expect a higher uptick. I would imagine they're sitting around that coaching office saying, we got to figure out a way to get more screens and be more deceptive and catch teams blitzing us, all of that stuff. So while the number's kind of silly how low it is right now, which is like, I think that Baker's like 31st in screen attempts in the NFL right now, I would imagine that they know they have to get that part of their game rolling, and I would be pretty stunned if it's not a big part of what they do Sunday. So it'll increase, and they have the talent to do it. They have linemen who run well in space, who can get out in front and block for people. So the good thing is that they've run a relatively decent offense right in the middle of the league, and it's not even really been a big part of what they do. And I'm not just talking running backs. I'm talking they need to get tight ends more involved, which they've been okay with getting the tight ends involved, but more wide receiver screens too, to let guys catch quick throws and get out in space and make some plays that way too. So I expect all of it. I expect all three position groups to be involved in a higher volume of screenplay in the second half of the year.
You said the Browns ranked 31st in the first half of the season. My bold prediction is that they are top 5 in screenplays the last 8 games of the year. Whether it's them getting a bye week to realize that they have to use those more, or being without OBJ, or just giving the defense a different look. I think screenplays, like you said, are going to be a huge part of the offense the final 8 games of the year.
Have to be. It's too much of a part of this type of offense that is relying on deception and various different things that involve confusing the eye location and eye discipline of defenses. So to only run 12 of those is not enough. You have to make teams fear over blitzing and things like that, and you have the athletes to get out in space. So it would be extremely disappointing to me if I didn't see a high volume increase in that the rest of the year, and it'd be a question I would want Kevin Stefanski to answer, to be honest.
Yep. Yeah. Screenplays, running the ball, and just play actions. I think those, I feel like those 3 are kind of obvious. But I feel like if the Browns offense wants to be successful in the post OBJ second half of the season era, they have to do all 3 of those. And they have to be, because the run game will open up the other 2, and then the screen game will open up the running game and the play action game. So it's just all 3 of them are like opening up the game for each other. So if they can be successful at all 3, that's a huge part of the offense. And if they are, I think they will be a playoff team. I think that those 3 are a huge question mark. And if they can be successful, at least like 2 out of the 3, I think they can be a playoff team this year.
Yeah, there's no doubt they should be pushing for the playoffs. And with the way this defense, the way the offense has a favorable matchups the rest of the way against some pretty below average to bad defenses, they should be able to put up some points. They need to win 5 games. Ideally, you win 5 of your last 8, and you have an opportunity to play Pittsburgh week 17, where Pittsburgh might be packing it in with a bye week and all that stuff, looking out their windshield. So there's opportunities to win quite a few games. These first 3, you have 2 games in New York against pretty bad New York teams that are still on the schedule too. So keep all that in mind, and there's no reason to not feel optimistic. They're getting healthier. Losing Odell stinks, and that's tough, but there's still enough talent offensively to win enough games to make the playoffs. And it starts here. If you come out of this bye week and you don't beat the Texans, then you're probably not a playoff team anyway. You have to win these games where you're hosting teams coming off a bye week, and everybody's getting healthy, and all of that stuff is coming into play too. So should feel optimistic about this stuff.
For sure. Speaking of Pittsburgh, I know as an Ohio State fan, I never want to see Michigan win, but I think as a Browns fan, it wouldn't be too bad if the Steelers keep on winning, because I know you want to beat the best to be the best, but if they get like a backup full of Steelers in week 17 for what should be an easy win if it is backups, that helps the Browns playoff chances. So why not do that? And the more the Steelers win, the more chance they have of having a first round bye and having it clinched before week 17. So I think the best case scenario for that is that the Steelers have the number 1 seed in the AFC clinched and just don't play anyone week 17 against the Browns. And the Browns could be fighting for a playoff spot.
Yeah, in a season that is very weird and marred by injuries, and obviously the issues with COVID and all of that stuff. You want to be in a position where it would be ideal. I mean, we all want to see Pittsburgh lose every game. I get it, but that's not the way it's trending. And if you could get to week 17 where they have nothing on the line, and Cleveland maybe has 9 wins or 10 wins at that point or something, it's not out of the realm. Cleveland could have 10 wins at that point if they win these first 3 and they have 2 in New York that they can win. It wouldn't be crazy to think that it could come down to maybe Cleveland and Oakland are sitting at 10 wins apiece going into week 17, and Pittsburgh's 13-3 or whatever, 13-2 or 12-3, and it doesn't even matter. They have the bye locked up. They would say, okay, we really need these 2 weeks to get right, and they could throw out Mason Rudolph or something like that. So you just look for those opportunities. If you can find them, it would be ideal. And like I said, it's rare you get a second half of the season schedule that sets up as favorably as Cleveland sets up. So you really, really hope they can take advantage of it.
Absolutely. And I'm looking at the schedule right now. Texans, Eagles at home, and then at Jaguars. I think if the Browns want to be a legitimate playoff team, they have to win 2 out of those 3. And then they go to Tennessee. Tennessee, just like the Browns, they've been a roller coaster. Derrick Henry has looked unstoppable at times. Their defense has looked suspect. The Ravens on a short week. I know the Ravens dominated the Browns week 1, but on a short week, you have no idea what could happen. Injuries, anything. And then at the 2 New York teams, those should be very I won't say easy wins, but if the Browns can't beat the two New York teams, then that's a question. And then the Steelers, like we said. So, yeah, the Browns could very well be, I mean, I'd even say 6-2. If they win 2 out of the next 3, and then Tennessee's a toss-up, Baltimore's a toss-up, the Steelers are a toss-up, but if things go in their favor, they could very well finish the season 6-2 and then be 11-5 on the year.
Yeah, and it gets to the point too where, if they lose 2 of these next 3, it's like they're not a play. They don't deserve to be in the playoffs.
Yeah.
So, you lose that. You can play out scenarios in your mind all you want, but if you can't beat 3 teams, the 3 teams they have coming up, and Philly's getting a little healthier, but you host these 2 teams in Cleveland, 2 of the next 3, and you go to Jacksonville to play a pretty terrible Jacksonville team. Like, you just get to the point where you say, I don't know, they're not good enough to be in the playoffs anyway, so I'm not going to let it beat me up. So the only game that would be frustrating to look back on that could haunt their season is that Oakland game, because you can lose some head-to-head tiebreakers in that scenario. So we'll see how it shakes out. But like we talked about, they're in a good position to get to the playoffs for the first time in a long time.
Yeah, it's weird. I guess as the season goes on, the Browns can be scoreboard watching for playoff scenarios. Usually they're scoreboard watching to see who's going to get like a top 5 pick or the first pick in the NFL draft. But this year, they could be scoreboard watching for a playoff scenario. That is crazy. I don't care what you say. The Browns playoff watching or the Browns scoreboard watching for a playoff scenario it's new, but I like it. I like it a lot.
Yeah, it's cool, man. And they build a roster that I think is good enough to get to the playoffs. They just have to find a way to coach them up and get them there. And I know it's been a weird season. It's been a weird year, and there's a lot to go on. And a lot that has gone on leading into this year, and they've been behind the 8 ball with the new staff and all of that. But if you're able to lead this group to the playoffs for the first time in forever, with a pandemic that's hit, and a new coach and a new GM and a new defensive coordinator, and all of it is new, it says a lot about the group going forward. So, in my opinion, they should be pushing all in with their guys, and you just, all you need is a ticket to the dance, man. Because it sounds crazy, but it's a weird year. You may go into the second round, you win your wild card game, you go to Pittsburgh, and maybe Ben Roethlisberger's hurt, or maybe someone gets COVID. You never know. You really, in this year, you never know. You don't want anybody to get hurt. You don't want anybody to come down with this virus, but you never really know where it all could go. So just getting into the playoffs this year it's extra important, because it's there's an added element of things going on that are all the more strange and could lead to even less predictable outcomes. So I'm interested in one thing, and that's just getting there, and then you can go from there. Baseball's a sport or a little less predictable, and you just want to get in, because you never know what happens if you just get in. Football's got a little more predictability, same with basketball, but with the weird elements going on, it's kind of the same in basketball. When they went to the bubble, you just wanted to get in the playoffs, because if you got in, you never know what could happen. And it feels a little bit like that with football this year.
Yeah, I mean, even if you say, well, they're going to lose to the Kansas City Chiefs of the world or a fully healthy Pittsburgh team, just getting to the playoffs, I feel like makes such a big difference for a Browns team that is used to losing. I mean, I know these are professional athletes. I know some of them haven't been with the Browns for the last 3 or 4 years when it's been really bad. But the winning mentality, if you go into every Sunday thinking that you're going to win rather than believing that you're going to lose, that changes so much, whether it's the confidence, whether it's the team chemistry, anything. I mean, and then you added the weirdness on top of it. That's why it's just so important that if the Browns can make the playoffs any way possible, that's huge for the team, not only this year, but going forward.
Agreed. It should be their absolute focus. It's something I'm sure it is. I mean, they know the data. They haven't been to the playoffs in nearly 2 decades. It's not a secret, but it's like you have an opportunity to get it done this year, a real opportunity with a schedule that allows for some cushion there, and hopefully they can take advantage. Because if they don't make the playoffs this year, it's disappointing. I mean, you can point to any excuse you want, and that's fine. There are plenty of excuses to be found, but at the end of the day, it's like nobody cares, man. Work harder and find a way to get into the playoffs with this schedule. So hopefully they do.
Absolutely. And in football, you can't use injuries as an excuse. Everyone deals with them, and it's just the next man up mentality. I know that's obviously easy to say, but it is. It's just the next man up. No matter who's hurt, next guy has to step up. And if you want to be a playoff team, like you said, no excuses. You just have to win football games, no matter how it's done, no matter who you have on the field. You just have to win football games, and it's as simple as that.
Couldn't agree more, and I'm sure that's a lot of what Kevin Stefanski preaches with his adaptability and all of that stuff that are focal words for him. So, yeah, I feel good about it going into the second half of the year, and I have no reason not to right now. So hopefully that comes to fruition.
For sure. All right, Jake. Any final thoughts before we finish off the second quarter roundup of the Brown season?
No, exciting stuff, man, in terms of them getting healthy and at the right time and going into a second half of the year where they're all a bit more gelled schematically and knowing what they're supposed to be doing and having spent more time together. And Browns fans should be excited if you're going to the game. I know it looks like it's going to be sloppy, but be loud, man. Like they need some home field advantage here. They need it to be difficult on opposing quarterbacks, and it'll be really interesting little storyline to see two quarterbacks in Deshaun Watson that the Browns passed on and Carson Wentz both coming to Cleveland in very important games for the Browns franchise. And hopefully, the hope is that Baker can play really well and you don't have to think about it. But just kind of always something with the Browns, man. These quarterbacks coming back into Cleveland who they passed on and all that stuff, and just fun storylines. But hopefully, we come back together. We'll do this again later in the year, and they'll have pushed themselves into a place that they're in the real contention and maybe even close to locking up a spot.
And you also cannot forget about the Duke Johnson revenge game. It's looking like David Johnson's not going to play, so Duke Johnson will be RB1 for the Houston Texans this Sunday.
Yeah, and Darren Fells and all. There's a heavy connection between the Texans and the Browns for sure, and it'll be fun. It'll be really fun to welcome back Duke, and it'll be fun to see Deshaun up close. He's a hell of a quarterback, and hopefully they can bottle that team up a little bit and get a big win.
All right. Thanks, Jake, for joining us again for the second quarter recap. We'll be back with you in 4 weeks, hopefully talking even more playoffs. If we're still having some playoff talk in 4 weeks, I think that's very good news because the next 4 games, 3 of them are very, very winnable. So, yeah, Jake and I will be back with you in 4 weeks. Yeah, go Browns. Thanks, guys.